Well, good morning, folks. Top of the morning to you, eh? We have a new president. It is what it is. There's no sense in arguing about it. It's done. And what we got to hope for is a better 4 years for our economy, for our businesses, for our families, and not much more we can do. So no sense in quarreling about it. But I wanted to talk to you this morning about the importance of becoming and transitioning from a technician, that is a good technician, is a solo operator, most likely has grown to around 150,000, which is about the average, before they start experiencing pains. Generally, it's that number that most solo operators get to, and they start where they're already fatigued. They're working 60 hours a week. They are stuck between a rock and a hard place because they don't have enough time to do sales and grow, and they don't have an admin, and 30% of their work is about admin and quoting prices. They don't have the money to market yet because $1,500 a month doesn't buy you a whole lot, depending on where you're at. If you're doing 10% marketing, and if you want to grow, you really need to be around 20-25%, depending on what market you're in, and depending how fast you want to grow. The biggest mistake that I see with a lot of solo operators is looking at what other people are doing and asking, I can't believe it has grown in 4 years, and I know that I'm a great and a better technician and provide better quality work than him, and he now has 3 trucks on the road. Here's the facts on that. He's a better business person than you are. The fact that he may be doing it wrong, that he may be doing it less than you, that he may be doing it illegally, immorally, unethically, is irrelevant to the fact that you are not growing. So you need to put that aside and focus on what do you need to do to learn what he learned, to know what he knows, so that you can do it your way better and grow and not worry about that. Because what I find in 100% of the cases of consulting, that if somebody calls me and says, Frank, I want to grow and I'm stuck. I'm at 150,000, 200,000. That seems to be the max that a solo operator can handle, because every market is different. Because remember, you're wearing 17 hats. You got to do sales, you got to do marketing, you got to do scheduling, you got to do admin, and then you got to go out and actually do the work. So do I bring in an admin or do I bring in a technician? Nobody can answer that question. Why? Because until you know your numbers and know exactly where everything is at, and know the numbers that you should know the numbers you need to know, in order for you to be able to manage your business by the numbers. You can't manage by emotions. You can't manage by wishing. You can't manage by hoping. You have to learn to manage by numbers. Business is about the numbers. Yes, I know that you went into business to have freedom, but now you're working 60 hours a week and you're making not much more than you were, or if you are, you're wondering if it's even worth it. So I've been asking this same question with everybody I've met for the last 8 years that I've been meeting with people who ask me, come visit, come to Miami. They're on vacation. They're in town for a conference. They give me a call. They hit me up on Messenger. And they want to know how you grow. And the first thing I ask is, all right, let's talk about your basic numbers. How much revenue are you actually producing? Well, I think it's I need to know exactly how much you're producing per month, how much you produced last year, how much you're producing per month. I need to know how much you're producing per week. I need to know how much you're producing per day on average. Why? Because unless you know those numbers, you're not a manager. And you need to transition from being a technician who turned business owner, and you skip the management part. That's the biggest challenge I see with people that have never managed a business. They don't know what they don't know. I get it. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not coming down on you, but I'm going to let you know exactly in this podcast everything you need to know about where your numbers need to be. The number one thing is you need to go get accounting software. And if you're $100,000 a year and you don't know, then you need a bookkeeper, but you can bypass that with QuickBooks. You connect all of your business cards, all of your bank, everything into QuickBooks, and in 10 minutes a week, you can do the bookkeeping and at least know where all your expenses are, what percentage of your expenses are going where, and you have your numbers. Number two is you need some type of software, whether it's Gorilla Desk, Pest Routes, Pest Pack. I don't care. I'm not promoting any brand. I'm just telling you that you can't run a business on paper using Excel spreadsheets and wasting an enormous amount of your time that you don't have to save $150 a month. It's asinine why you're doing that. I mean, I still talk to people. Well, I'm still on paper. I'm still using Excel spreadsheets. I can't afford $49 a month for Gorilla Desk. That's ridiculous. You really have a problem there because you're spending all this time you don't have, and you're wondering how you make more time, and the way you make more time is through automation. So you need to have, let me see here, 1 second. Why are you going? Oh, there we go. This thing went dead on me. All right, now I'm back. All right. I'm trying to figure out where my map is. All right. So, what numbers do you need? You need to know what your cost of goods actually is in every category. Now you get down to categories. So let's start tackling your cost of goods. How much is chemical? Actual chemical, okay? If you're going to break down your chemical because you really want to know if you're spending too much, then how much are you spending on rodenticide if you're doing rodent work? How much are you spending on supplies, gloves, actual supplies? I mean, this is basic accounting 101, bookkeeping 101. If you're just handing a bunch of receipts and all right, so hopefully I'm back. I got interrupted by a call that was coming in. Unfortunately, this is the phone that I do it on. Let me just make sure that I take off my notification. Yeah, I just silenced it. Sorry about that, folks. I lost you there. So if you're just handing over a bunch of receipts to your accountant and not telling your bookkeeper how to create a chart of accounts for your business, they're going to just lump it on their cost of goods. So let's say you're spending on rodent cases and you're doing a ton of rodent cases. Why is this going to be important? You say, this is a lot of work, Frank. Well, it's a lot of work if you want to know where your numbers really are, because when you grow, you're going to have 10x the headaches if you don't do it. The reason I know is because I actually took accounting in college, and I can tell you that the only course that ever helped me in my business, in business school, believe it or not, was accounting and finance, knowing where the numbers are. As a manager who ran $2 million stores, I needed to know where the numbers were. And so you're breaking your chart of accounts down to everything. You got to separate your gloves and your materials that you use that are not pesticides, and keep that out of the equation of cost of goods for actually performing the service. When you go to a shop, you notice that there's a bill for shop supplies and there's a certain percentage. There's a reason for that. They need to know, separate what it is that they're actually spending on supplies versus parts. Okay? So you break it down, chemicals, whether it's granular chemicals, bait chemicals, it doesn't matter. You keep all that together, but now your rodent stations. Why? Because you need to analyze then all of your accounting, all of your sales groups and pest routes and Gorilla Desk and all these softwares break down your categories. So if you're doing rodent services, but you're spending 50% cost of goods on rodent service, you got to evaluate your pricing. Somewhere in your pricing, you made a huge mistake. And how do you know you're pricing correctly and you're pricing for profit when you don't know what your real cost of goods are? And understand that cost of goods, people will say, well, that's an insignificant. It's an insignificant number if you actually know your numbers and you're managing it. But I got people that are spending 13% cost of goods on chemical because they're using an exorbitant amount of bait around a property and then charging $55 to $65 for that service. You can't spend that enormous amount of granular bait on a service because you want to provide the best service on the market, and you're doing eco-friendly and you're doing IPM and you're using granular bait, and then you're charging the same price that somebody else is charging for spraying when your cost of goods is 13% and their cost of goods is 3%. So an analyst would say, well, that's not insignificant. It's insignificant when you're looking at a $2 million company who's actually fine-tuned their operation and they know exactly what they're spending every penny on. You need to track every single penny. Hold on a second, it dropped. I need to go over here. A second. Okay. I gotta know I got about 45-minute drive. So I'm gonna get into a lot of details. This is gonna be like not a sit a little bit over here so I'm more comfortable. But a nuts and bolts podcast. So if you're taking notes, note that you need to set up your chart of accounts. Most of the accounting companies that are out there like PCO bookkeepers and Braxton, they won't take you on until you're a certain number. So trying to get, you might call Pest Daily, ask them to send you a chart of accounts or do a podcast or an actual chart of account they're using to set you up correctly, because I think that's probably a great value. I have mine. I haven't published it, but I could, I guess. But you need to get a good chart of accounts where every service is broken down by revenue. And the good thing is that with QuickBooks, you can get, let's say with Pest Routes, I know exactly how much I'm producing per month on every single service, on every single category. I know what my average price is. Then I go to my QuickBooks and I know what my average cost is. I can do a very quick analysis to know what services are really profitable, which ones I need to work on the pricing. And most of the time, people don't know how to do a pricing analysis. How do they price their services? They're asking everybody on the web, on groups, what their pricing is. Well, you need to know your numbers, and you need to know what your costs are in your area and what your overhead is. And nobody can know that. I mean, you don't know how much to write off because you don't have a really good balance sheet. So you need to get with your bookkeeper to make sure that your balance sheet is accurate, because there's an enormous amount of write-offs if you make it. You make investments that year in equipment, you can get an accelerated depreciation and offset some of your taxes that you're going to pay that year. So those are the things that you really need to know. You need to know how many services are you doing a day? Well, I'm doing 8. Well, okay, great. How much are you making a day? Well, I'm making $600. All right. How much time are you spending for those $600? Well, about 10 hours. Well, you need to what I find is you need to work on your route optimization, because you're driving all over God's creation instead of setting up territories as a small operator where you can't drive across town 45 minutes to an hour for a single client. Like I drive right now to this territory, okay, hour and 40 minutes with traffic, right? But today on 5 stops, it produces around $1,200 for these 5 stops. Sometimes I'll go here for 6-7 stops and it's $2,500. Why? Because I only come to this territory once a week. I tell my clients, listen, folks, if you're going to sign up with me, it's in my contract, and I talk to them. I only in that territory once a week. If you got a problem, I'm not going to fly out there to service you other than on that day. They know it, and what they'll do is I'll go there and they'll come, oh, I forgot to tell you that I had this problem. Well, guess what? It's going to be next week. Because solo operators can't have the efficiency that large companies have when they have 5 techs in an area, or the territories are really small because they have an enormous amount of route density. And that technician is actually in that territory every single day. That's the way I was when I first started. I focused on one territory, and literally I had about 100 clients, and it would produce about $100,000 a year. And I was there every single day. And when somebody called me, I could be there in minutes, like 5 minutes, because usually it was in one development that I focused on when I got all those clients. So unless you can know your numbers and know, why am I spending, ask yourself this, why are you spending 10 hours a day in the field for $800 when you should be spending your day on $1,500 on average? That's the magic number to hit. You can be up or down. It could be more or less, but that's kind of like your average number in the industry per tech. $1,500 a day. You need around 300. That you want to hit around that 225, 250,000 a year per tech. That's your magic number, where you can pay the better salaries, you can have the benefits, and you can have. So that's kind of your magic number, somewhere around 200 per technician. So you need to know your daily numbers. You need to track your day, folks. What are you spending your day on? How many hours are you actually devoting to admin? How many hours are you actually devoting to sales? How many hours are you devoting to marketing? And how many hours a day are you actually devoting to tech work? Okay? And until you understand that there's a difference between how much you make per tech and how much you make per employee. Right now, the number is going to be somewhere in the industry between 99,000 to about 150,000 per employee, depending on where you're at, depending on your operation, depending on but for a small business like a solo operator, you need to be at that high number of somewhere around 125 to $150,000 for every employee that you want to bring on. I don't care if that's an admin. I don't care if that's a tech. I don't care if that's a salesperson. I don't care what that number, who it is. But unless you have right now with $150,000 a year in revenue, the only person you can afford is you. If you want to bring in another employee and break even on that, you need to bring that up to at least 200,000, another 35 to 50,000, so that you have money to pay that employee, have the time to train that employee on exactly what you want him to do, and then you're able to take that hat after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, take that hat off and take a couple of hats off of you, so that you can do what you do best, whether it's sales, whether it's technical work. So if you don't think you can hire a technician because you're not going to find a technician good enough for what you can pay, then you're probably better off hiring an admin and you still be the technician and train that admin to sell. Like my admin can sell the basic services. When it comes to termite and lawn and shrubs and palms and all this, I got to get involved. So I try to make that at least you can handle 50 to 60% of the calls on a daily basis without getting me involved. Most of the time, it's like way over 80% because very few people are calling for those specialty services. Most people are calling for the end road service. That's already on a price sheet. She's got an entire price sheet on our mosquito service, on our roach service, on our flea and tick service, has a price sheet on actually the lawns, because I taught her how to measure a lawn to give a price. We can do it. She can do that right over Google Earth. You know, she takes the lawn, minuses the house, the driveway, and the sidewalk, and that's your total lawn, and then she can quote it. There's no need for me to get involved. The thing is, if you want to micromanage, because, well, there's no way I'm letting an admin quote prices, you'll be quoting prices all day in the field, taking every call. What good is for you to hire an admin? If you can't spend 2 to 3 months training that person on how to schedule and showing her the territories, or he, and having them understand, and you don't have your territories lined up to where you're all over the place and nobody can figure out where the hell Waldo is, there's no way an admin can ever do that. You have to be highly structured and have every KPI, key performance indicator. In other words, the goal is, hey, we're getting, how many calls a day are we getting? Are you tracking your calls? No, I'm not tracking my calls. How do you know your marketing is effective? Well, because I make X amount of sales. Okay. Now hire an admin and then say we're getting 5, 6, 7 calls a day, what was your closing rate and what's going to be their closing rate? Well, that's the reason why I don't want them, because no, you need to train them. You need to invest the time to train them to do it, and unless always be doing it. So you need to know what the numbers are and say, listen, if you quote so many of these, would have closed so many of these. If they're not putting it into the system every lead, and you're not tracking every lead, the percentage of close with the real percentage of close, you're pulling that out of your butt, because you're handling so many calls and you're quoting prices and you're saying, I close 80%, I close 50%. When in reality is, if you were actually putting them into a system, sending that person a quote and looking at your close ratios, you would know that it's a whole lot less than you think it is. Yeah, if you're only getting 3 calls a day and you sell 2, that's easy to track. When we're getting an average of 25 calls a day right now, we're somewhere between 250 and sometimes 500 calls a month. There is no way that I can pull that number out of my butt and track it. So what do? The quotes, put it into the system. Put it into the system. Let's track it. Let's close it. That's a lot of work, Frank. Yeah, it is a lot of work. Managing a business is work. These are the costs. Let me put this over here. These are the costs associated with growth that most people don't understand. There's an administrative cost that needs to get paid, and that's why you need that $150,000 a year per employee. Okay, so now you know what your costs are, your cost of goods. Now you know what your revenue is per each item. Now you know what your total revenue per month is. Now you know what you're producing on an average day. Okay, and on an average week. Why? Because now you have solid numbers of what you expect an employee to do if you hire a tech. And you know how many hours you're doing the actual work in, not just spending 10 hours in the field when you're answering calls, getting bothered. When I get 10 calls a day, it stops me from being able to do what I have to do right now. Like, me and my tech are going to the same territory today. Why? We're light on work, right? Because we're getting more efficient. It's not raining. We're not getting held back. When summer's here, for those 4 months, 5 months out of the year, it's miserable because half of the time you're sitting in a truck waiting. Efficiency is not the same. So when people say, well, if you're able to do so many jobs per day, right, and you should be able to do X, that's wonderful. Now, do that in South Florida and plan that out where it's raining 80 inches in the summer, in the year, and you don't have, you're basically operating at 70-80% capacity per truck, compared to the winter where now we're operating at 80%. We got 20% left over of time, and we can do training and we can do other things. So right now he's meeting me up on the territory where I'm going to be at, and we're going to be doing training today on landscapes and learning to ID certain problems that he's been having trouble with, and now I can invest some time in him. I can't afford to do training over the winter, Frank, because I got to lay my people off because I don't have any income. You're seeing my problem? You should be able to keep a skeleton crew or add on services like wildlife, right? Or rodent control or something else that can keep your crews working. And then, yes, you're going to pay them for not doing so much work, but you're budgeting in that to your annual cost of doing business. You don't just lay people off. And then with this economy, the way it is, you lay people off. Good luck trying to get them back next year if they find somebody else, if somebody else picks them up. You see, those are things you need to budget for, the numbers. You need to manage by the numbers. I'm doing X amount a year. Can I afford to pay an employee for the whole year to keep them working, to have me do other stuff that I need to do that we don't get to do in the summer? Can you go to a Paul Bello conference in the winter Can you go to Pest World? What can you do in the winter to sharpen your sword? Do you have the budget to do it? Unless you know your numbers, you don't know what you can budget for. You need to understand budgeting and how much money and revenue you have so you can invest. Like right now, I'm planning on buying a truck before the end of the year. Why? Because I can get an accelerated deduction on that, and the amount of taxes I pay personally on my LLC with my subchapter S, you can bring in 6 figures and you can actually declare half of that. This is where people don't understand that growing and knowing the numbers, knowing the tax laws, knowing this, tax planning with your accountant, sitting there in tax planning and saying, if I do this, I have a projected income of this, what's this going to look like next year? And he says it's going to look like this, this, and this based on the current tax law. If you do this, this, and this, why do you think businesses report very little profit and they keep growing? Because the tax laws favor your growth. The technician thinks, oh, he's just growing because he's greedy. Because why does he need another? Why? Because the laws are going to favor him to grow. If I grow, I pay more in taxes, I pay more employee taxes, I hire more people, I grow revenue, I buy more trucks, I write off more things, and I can keep growing and investing everything back into my business, declare a zero profit, pay no taxes on that, or take all of the profits, put it back into the business, not pay taxes on that profit because I reinvested it, and I can keep growing, and then I can build a business that I can sell one day because that's my retirement, and that's a strategy. And most technicians think that's just greed and stupidity and work and all this, and I don't want to go through it. Well, I got news for you. Smart business people, that's what they do. That's why they grow. Like I said, the reason somebody's growing more than you is because they know something you don't. You need to have chart of accounts, all of your services, and then figure out from there, reverse engineer it, and then figure out if it's profitable. If your cost of goods are continuously high, above industry standards, you got to figure out what you're spending exactly on fuel, what you're spending on vehicle insurance, what that lease or note payment is that you're going to be writing off. What does that look like to know the cost of route operation? And then how much can I afford to really pay a technician if I want to grow and I want to invest X? If I want a 55% gross profit, and this is where the numbers come in, gross profit versus gross income versus gross profit on the route versus gross profit on the business. Your gross profit on your route needs to be minimum 50% is your ideal number. At 55, you're doing better, and at 60, you're doing great. But you find out that at over 60, the cost has to come from somewhere, and it's usually hiring an employee. And if you pay too little for an employee, you will find that you will have really bad employees, people you got to babysit, and you can pay too much, but then you won't have enough profit to pay the overhead, depending on what, because all of the overhead from every route that you have gets paid to pay the overhead. So that's where you pay yourself from, that's where you pay the cell phones from, that's where you pay the taxes from, the insurances from, the admins that you need to hire, the rental space that you need. Everything gets paid from that gross profit from the route. right? So what are you going to spend on admin? Well, industry standard is 6%, right? Wonderful. If you're making $100,000 a year, 6% is $6,000. Where are you going to buy an admin for 6%? That number makes no sense, folks. Why doesn't it make any sense? Because it's based on large companies having $1 million, and 6% is what they're spending on one admin for 5 routes, right? And you have an admin for every 5 routes, and now you have a service manager for every 5 routes, or 6 routes, or 7 routes, or 10 routes, depending on your efficiency. You don't have enough for an admin unless you bring your wife home. Let's say your wife you're making $100,000 in revenue, and you're taking 45 to 55% of that for yourself because your overhead is really low because you work from home. You have no storage, no building fees, no rents. It's you, a cell phone, $49 a month, $100 a month in accounting, whatever, and you're banking a lot, right? Now you need to bring wife home, but she makes, you're making $55,000 a year, let's say, $50,000 a year, and wife makes almost the same. Where are you going to get the other $50,000 to make up for her income to bring her home? Let's say she makes $36,000. Have you saved enough for a whole year, $36,000? In other words, to endure a year, because if she takes over the office, you train her on the weekends so she can do it while she's home. Mom doesn't have the time because she's cleaning a house, taking care of kids. Fine. Hire a house cleaner every week for $200 a week, whatever. And then so she has the time to be home on Saturdays learning the business, and you start training her on how to do the routes. And every Sunday she does the routes for you. Now she learns how to do the routes. Now she learns how to quote. You saved a year. Can you save a year? Let's say you've been in business. On average, it's going to take about 4 to 5 years on the average tech to reach the $150,000 mark. It's between 4 and 5 years on average. Why? Because they don't have marketing dollars. They don't have a lot of sales ability. They're really slow in getting the word out and getting sales. You teach wife how to quote. You teach wife, and you save $36,000, $40,000 for her to quit her job and come home. Because if she can handle those phones, and you can be out selling and looking for business, especially if you're doing commercial, it's door to door. Then you can grow that. You can make an extra $20,000, $30,000 that year. You'll be a little tight. You cut back on some things at home, and those first 5 years are brutal. But how are you going to get an admin? Because now you got to hire one, and now you got to have the time to interview. And you need the time to put out the ads, look at the resumes, interview. Do you or your wife or spouse, whoever it is at home, have the ability to handle that on the weekends and say, you know what, Saturday mornings, we're going to do interviews. And we have the questions, and we've taken some courses on how to interview, and you spend the next 3 to 4 to 5 months learning how to interview and how to hire. But you got to know the numbers. You got to know what it's going to take. And what I find is, I was having the conversation with Joel last night. I said, it's not Joel that, he's way more aggressive, way smarter than me, way younger. He's way lazier than me, which is good. I was telling him about this, because you'll find usually a way to get it done so you don't have to do anything. Go up to the light. And that's a good thing, because he's ambitious in that part. But here's the reality. You don't have the business management knowledge that you need in order to know what the next level looks like. So you need a good coach, right? So you need a good a good person that's been there to mentor you through that process and tell you what you need to know so that you can get it done, right? So a good consultant can do that for you and accelerate that knowledge, because if you pay a consultant a couple $1,000s, a real good one that really knows what they're doing, pay them a couple $1,000s for a couple of months, whatever it is, to accelerate what you need to know, so that then you can implement it and say, okay, what do I need to know if I'm going to bring my wife home? She's thinking of coming home. What am I going to need to know these numbers? Then you know the numbers. And now you know what the expectations are. Now you know where the pitfalls are. Now you know pretty much everything. This thing, I got to get a new little bracket from my phone. It's falling apart. I got to get a new one. So you need to know every single number. And then say, okay, if I invest X amount of time now, 2 hours a day, in making sales calls, because I don't have to do the scheduling, because I don't have to do this, because I don't have to do that, I should be able to grow by X%. And you need to be realistic on that growth. So if you got 100,000, that second year you might grow by 20%. You could grow 30%. You could grow 35%. When it comes to marketing, you need to know what the real numbers are. And this is where people fall apart. Cost of acquisition. What is it really costing you to acquire the customer? And you don't know what you don't know because you're trying too many different things. But industry standard is around $150 CAC. Oh, actually, it's around $150. It could be more customer acquisition cost. So now you know you got to spend $150 for every customer you want to acquire. But you don't know that until you've actually done the investment, tracked it, really stayed on top of it, and really get to know the numbers, and testing until you get a real number. What most people do is after 3 months of losing money, they just quit the whole thing and say it just isn't worth it, rather than figuring out why they're failing at it. So what you need to do is find, if you want to do, let's say, whatever, Yelp marketing. Okay. What you need to do is talk to at least 20 people that are actually doing it successfully. Forget about the 99 people that said it's junk, because what they did is they tried it for 3 months and failed at it. You need to find yourself in the groups, 3, 4, 5 people that have been successful at it, and then hit them up and say, bro, what is the reality? What do I have to do to make this happen on this platform? Because if you put out, well, what's the most effective marketing? Referrals, because they're free. They're free. Everything that's free is wonderful, except you won't grow. If you can't grow a business from 100,000 and then to 250,000 in 1 year when you hire an employee on referrals. Now, a company that has $2 million, has a great customer base, decides, you know what, folks, we've got 1,200 clients. I'm going to hire one person, and we're going to set up a program where we're marketing, targeting, and we're asking for referrals on a regular basis, and that's going to be our growth method. You can do that then. If you want to slow down, in addition to the marketing you're doing, you can do that. Right? So you got to know the numbers. You got to know how much you really need to invest, because you might be in a market where the reality is you need to invest $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month in that platform in order for you to have success, because you got to dominate it. Anything you don't dominate, somebody else does. That's competition. That's the reality. You need to figure out where you can dominate and where you can invest. And when you're at 250,000, 300,000 a year, 400,000 a year, you find one thing you did will not take you to the next level. Now you need to invest in the second one. But most people don't exhaust the first one and really figure it out how to exhaust the first one before they jump to the second, third, and they just start trying all different things. And you can't do, when you have a 10% budget, That's all you can afford. You can afford $10,000 a year, barely, because you can't even fathom spending 10% on marketing to grow, because you're listening to all bunch of solo operators who basically are never going to grow. That's their intent. It's okay to do that if that's your intent. But don't tell me you're growing 20% a year after year. Yeah, when you started out, but don't tell me you're doing that after 7 to 8 years of business and you're still a solo operator 10 years later. I'm going to call BS on that. There's no way you can make 300,000-400,000 a year, because that would indicate you're making 300,000 to 400,000 a year and you're still a solo operator. It's not happening. Like, I was having a conversation with Joel last night. I said, look, I can handle a 50% growth right now when I get my second tech. But I got to make sure that his training is going to stay. Right now, I'm actually raising my prices so much that I'm not taking on a whole bunch of new customers, and only taking on the customers we really want, which is single family homes for ants and roaches. The basic ant maintenance service. I got to go on 595. I'm here. Because I don't want to take on lawns anymore. I don't want them. So I'm pricing them really high, and I'm pricing a lot of services high, so that I don't take it, because I don't want to take on a rodent job right now. Why? Because they're all specialty trips, $1,000 to $1,400. It's a $250 trip every time we go to take out one rat from your house, because I got to drive 45 minutes out of my way because we cover such a big area. So I'm being strategic. I don't want to take on any more work until I can focus now, which I started doing my Indeed this week, and I already got a couple of applicants that I want to look at. We're setting up, having Wifey look at the key questions, because she's very analytical. And I said, I want to get 10 key questions that I really want to ask out of 200 questions that I compiled. I compiled 200 employee questions that relate to everything from customer service to sales to time management to a lot of things that to diagnose if the person actually has experience in that area. So we ask a question that requires an answer of experience they've had, and depending on that answer, it tells me the level of experience they actually have. Like, I asked one guy in the Indeed app, to give you an example, I asked him, do you have experience in sales? If yes, what is the biggest sale you ever made? One wrote back $100. One guy says, well, I've sold, I'm a boat captain, and I've sold boats, and I've sold cars on the side to make money. That's good experience. The fact that he's a boat captain on I think a 60-footer says I'll respond. You see, I'm looking for things that indicate to me what I want, but I got to have a plan. So my plan is, she's going to look up the 200 questions. I picked 100 questions. I'm going to let her pick the top 10 from those 100 questions, look at the other ones, and then I'm going to put an automated video together where it's a one-way video where I ask the questions and I get to see what their answers are, right? And then after that, I will schedule a Zoom interview. I'm not going to meet somebody, waste my time. I'm going to schedule a Zoom interview, and I'm going to get deeper into them and their person and who this is if I'm really interested in what they have to say. My suspicion is going to be that it's going to be about 100 applicants to get 2 to 3 good interviews from what I'm getting. And then from those, 2 good interviews, I will extend an offer to go on a day, see how they perform, and I see them in the field. I will know instantly now from hiring 25 technicians what it is that I'm looking for specifically, and know if this person's even going to work out. Again, I know my numbers. It's going to be about 5 hires, 5 of those road trips before I make a decision on that technician, because he's got to be a detail-oriented person that's inquisitive. He's got to have certain soft skills, or else he won't make it as a lawn tech and an ornamental tech, because you got to memorize 20, 30 species of plants within 90 days. You gotta memorize about 5 diseases, deficiencies, very basic stuff. Within 30 days, he's gonna have to ride with me honestly on a lawn route, probably about 3 months, compared to my GHP technician that I can let loose after a week to do maintenance. And then like training is ongoing. Once a week, I try to find a day where I find out where he's hurting, and then I go out into the field and I say, okay, let's look at this, let's look at that. Or, hey, remember that problem you were having? Here, I found the source. Here's where it is. Here's where you missed it. So training is not always, like, hey, like an app, like an iPhone app, like Google Lens. He can take a picture of a plant, a palm tree, and Google Lens will tell him what that is. He doesn't have to call me. He says, oh, okay. So when he calls me, he says, hey, the Bismarck palm that's at this customer's house doesn't look right. Because I told him this is what it should look like. Everything should look green, no marks on it, no stains. If there's stains or blotches or damage or eaten, something's wrong. It should look green. It should look perfect, picture perfect. And if it doesn't, then you need to call me. So I give him the standard, and then everything else becomes questionable. So literally, he needs to call me on every stop, because he's going to find, if you're not finding something wrong on every stop, you're not looking. You're just going through the motions as a technician. You're going through, I needed to spray the lawn, I sprayed the lawn. I didn't look to see if there's something wrong. So again, how many times a day is a tech going to call you? How many times are you going to have to make time for this? You need to do time management and have everything down to as much of a science as you can, allowing enough for the unpredictable. So let's say you look up the principle, the 80-20 rule, and basically use that as your standard. Your 20% is always your fudge factor. I budget everything 80%, time, this, that, and then I allow for 20% of interruptions a day. Then I know how many hours a day I need to invest in something. And get good at saying no. Most of the time, we're people pleasers. We do not want to say no, so we're saying yes to a lot of things we have no business saying yes to. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example, guys. If you're listening to me, understand I'm not being a hard ass. But let me see. I'm going to be on the 8:38. I got to go to the 8:38. All right, stay on this road. East. Stay on the 29A. Or do I stay on the 8:38 or the 9:42? This is really weird. That's 95. I'm not going to stay on that. Stay here until Sunrise Boulevard. Okay, got it. 95 to Sunrise. All right. So, and I've got about 20 minutes. So I'm trying to utilize my time to give you as my thoughts come up, because my ADHD kicks in, a distraction kicks in, and I lose my train of thought. But I don't carry notes for this, guys. I don't write a series of notes of things I want to talk about. I just know what I want to talk about because I have the experience, so I can literally talk about it. It's just not going to be in any organized manner that you can go A, B, and C. And if you got this thing where it needs to be everything bullet pointed for you, and I lost you, sorry about that. You're just going to have to deal with it. But right now, I got people like, hey, when can I call you, man? Because I need to, 5 minutes of your time. No, you're not going to get 5 minutes of my time just at random. Everybody wants, like, it's just a quick, I want to pick your brain. There's not much brain to pick. And whatever is left over, I need to make sure that I have enough left over after you picked it. So, no. I'm thinking about doing the consulting, and I'm going to have, after I hire my tech, and I have some time on the weekends, I just don't feel like using it up for that. Again, I'm being selfish with my time, for my family, for the things I want to do at home, things that I neglect during the week that I can't have time planning and organizing. But I'm thinking about taking on 4 serious people that, and I'm going to limit it to probably 4, that are really wanting to grow, are stuck at 100, 150,000. They need to figure out what their next steps are, what to do. But I gave you the KPIs. I gave you the numbers. I'm going to do a checklist. Of the things that you're going to need to have ready, fixed, and done before we go into a consultation. There's no sense me taking an hour up of your time or mine, because I'm going to charge you for it, discussing something that you should have already known and had before we have the meeting, and getting that in order. Because if you don't have that in order, I'm going to tell you, well, call me back when you have it in order. Here's what you need. Here's the list. I'm going to publish the list. I'm going to have it on my site. Anybody who wants a consultation, I'm only going to do 1 consultation a week, 1 hour. That's all I can spare right now to help people. It is going to be paid, because you're going to have skin in the game. Too many people want too much free information, and what they want to do is ramble on about all the things they think they should be doing and want to do, and telling me, well, how do I do this and how do I do that? And they want a list of tactics. You want a list of tactics. What you do is you go on Facebook in any group and you ask, guys, if I was going to do this, what are the list of tactics that I need to have to do it? And you can get that for free. You don't have to waste my time on that. This is a lot more intimate, because this is going to have me drill down into all of the areas that you're failing at. Figuring out, you're going to have to invest in some assessments and pay for them, so that I can get a picture. You're going to have to do like, a DISC assessment, and you're going to have to pay for that. You're going to have to do the 6 Genius assessment. I recommend you already do that if you're seriously thinking about growing. Take the 6 Genius assessment. Take a DISC assessment, okay? So that I can evaluate the person. I'm diagnosing the person. I'm not giving you a list of tactics. Is totally useless in the hands of a wrong person. Like, for instance, one of my techs, he's not very technically or mechanically, or like if I asked him to diagnose this problem, like how to change a battery, he has a hard time changing a battery because he's not handy. One of my customers says, hey, I don't know if you know this, but that guy has never worked in the field a day in his life. Why? Because his hands are too nice. Customers observed this and called me. And I said, yeah, I know. And I know he worked as a purchasing manager for X years, for 10 years. But he's not particularly handy. So if I can give you all the tools, and I can give you, if you literally want to learn how to change a battery, folks, there is 1,500 million videos that you can go on YouTube and figure it out. If you're that lazy that you will not go on YouTube to figure it out, it's because you don't like to do it and you don't want to do it. And nobody's ever going to make you do anything. So me giving you a list of things to do that you can't do, don't want to do, not interested in doing, as a coach doesn't help you. So I need to decide, does this person need technical direction? Do we need to evaluate his protocols? We need to go down into your business one by one. For instance, if you're doing an inside and outside service saying, I need more efficiency, I said, here's the hard answer. You got to tell all your clients that you're only going to do exterior only services. You're not going to do interior service, or else you will never get out of this hole that you're in. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. There's nothing else to discuss here. We're done. Because I can't help you. You're not willing to do it. I had one conversation with a friend who had been counseling for 5 years. I told him, don't do that. 5 years later, he's insane. He spends all his time is scheduling customers and finding out when they're going to be home. And he can't grow past 2 technicians. He's making X, which he should be making X. And I said, this is what you have to do. I told you not to do it. Now you're going to have to go in call all your customers one by one. And what you're going to sell your customers is this. I am giving you a service guarantee. If you have a pest problem, I'm going to serve it for free, right? I'm going to service it for free. You're not selling a spray service. You're not selling a visit. You're selling a control service, and you're giving a guarantee. You're going to call every one of your customers, and you're going to write a nice letter, and you're going to use ChatGPT, and you're going to state the reasons why, and the costs are going to go up if customers want this. And in order to keep the cost low, provide the highest level of service, we're moving to this model. I'm giving you my personal guarantee that if anything happens, we're going to be there to service it if you have a pest problem. He found himself having to do that, going through that painful process now after I told him 5 years ago not to do that. He didn't listen. Now undoing something is much more painful than doing it. So understand that when you call me for a consultation, we're going to be doing. I'm probably going to do. I did a 12-week course on SEO, on local SEO. Very fruitful for the people that took it. It was very well. I'm thinking of doing that again, adding some stuff to it. But I'm also thinking of probably doing a 12-week group session for people that want to grow, the things that they need to do, and go through a formalized presentation where we have a small group of 10, 12 people. I'm going to limit it to 12 people in a group. I like 12. It was good enough for Jesus. It's good enough for me. Because then we can ask intimate questions about a lot of things that people can ask. How do we do this? How do we do that? Give you some tactics, give you things to work on so that you can start fixing your business. And I'm probably thinking about doing an hour of that once a week for 12 weeks. There's going to be a cost. I will probably announce it in the groups to do that because I see a huge need for that. But it doesn't help when you have 100 people online. You're not going to be able to answer that many questions. This is not something you can go deep on. Then later, if you want the counseling, you're going to have to commit for X amount of weeks or X amount of months, because until you fix the problems, if I give you homework and that homework's going to take you 3 months, there's no sense in me meeting up with you every week to discuss a new tactic, a new idea that came out of your butt while you were sitting on the toilet. And you're thinking about doing this now. I mean, your ADD, you got to get that under control. So that's what I'm doing. Is very, it's going to be very specific, very tailored, because counseling, it's like counseling. When I used to do youth counseling and when I used to do parent counseling, it was different problems. I found a pattern, but usually I know already the patterns that you're calling me with after doing hundreds of interviews with people over the last 10 years. The reason I do a lot of these free interviews, and I do hundreds of them, and I've done hundreds of them, is because I get to see the patterns. I get to see the common problems. So I'm pointing them out for free so that you can fix them. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of doing. It probably won't be for about maybe 2 months on one of these. I might be able to do the small business, getting things right, where we go actually through an actual chart of accounts. We look at my chart of accounts to look at everything that's in there, what those percentages are, because it's going to be pretty close to the industry. I mean, I check mine against the industry. I also have a couple of multi-million-dollar companies that will send me their P&L without numbers, but with percentages, so that I know what the percentages are. I mean, they don't, some people do share their numbers. They don't care. They give me their numbers. I don't share those numbers. I don't talk about it. It's not cool. But, the percentage is something you can share. So when you're doing administrative, you can see the difference. It's going to look different for a small company than it looks for a large company. But the thing is, it still has to be there. Things like that, we got to get past when I'm dealing in consulting is a lot of negative mindset, negative belief systems that people have about money that we have to overcome. A lot of what has to be done in these sessions is breaking cycles of behavior, breaking cycles of discipline, breaking things that happen to them and why they have a negative. It's a lot of counseling. I do more counseling than I do actually business consulting. I guess I'm just wired that as a minister, um, having grace and mercy with people that are struggling to understand certain things because of how they were raised, because they didn't have a father. Um, Understand that affects how your business runs because you have a criminal record, because you have a learning disability, maybe you have dyslexia, how you see yourself. A lot of things, bro, that play into this that people don't calculate in the equation, which is the major part. I would say 80% of it has to do with attitudes and aptitudes, and then the 20% have to do with technique. So I'm going to get ready to get to my client in about 8 minutes. I got to get to some roads now that I can't be looking down at the map. I got these long roads that I can do that. I'm going to go ahead and quit. I'll keep you posted. I'm going to be posting it, what I'm going to be doing, but just to let you know where we're going. I won't be able to take on 10, 12 people. It's going to be affordable, but it has to be worth my time to take it away and do it. And it has to be with people who are actually serious about their growth, not somebody somebody called people like that ask holes. They just keep asking and asking and asking, and they never do anything. They just want to get everybody's answer. They feel like if they get all this knowledge, they're somehow knowledgeable, and then they want to talk about it in groups because they learned it, but they're not doing it. I'm only interested in people that are really struggling, that want to help, that won't be able to afford a high-priced consultant. We're charging $600 to $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month for sessions. I'm going to charge what I normally would charge if I had to spend my time with a client. I know, right now I do garden consulting and I do HOA consulting and I do a lot of consulting for people that want to solve problems that nobody's solving. Let me see, I got to stay on the 838. And my fee, depending on the expertise I need, is between $159 to $259 an hour that I get for that. I do consulting for cities where they have issues with landscapes that they're not figuring it out. The reason they're not figuring it out is because they keep asking for the lowest quote and estimates, and they can't figure it out why. So that's it. I mean, I hope this helps. I'm getting out of here because I'm running into traffic now in downtown Broward, Fort Lauderdale, and I don't want to be on the